In Module 2, we're going to talk about how to get MADARA and GAMS onto your own system. So in this talk, we're going to discuss how to install the open source, freely available MADARA and GAMS projects on your system. To install MADARA and GAMS, you're going to need a virtual machine or host OS with Linux on it, a functioning internet connection, and you'll need to be installing Perl, Build Essential, and a few other prerequisites before we get started. So first things first, you're going to need to open up a terminal. We're going to need to install Git, and then we're going to need to figure out where you want GAMS to be installed, usually in your home directory, maybe in a projects directory, so maybe home projects GAMS. Then we need to download the GAMS repo, and we need to run a build script. We're going to walk you through that now. First things first, if at any point in this tutorial series you get lost, please refer to your slide notes. These have the actual text we use for installing GAMS on your system. It also includes the later examples we do for designing your own distributed artificial intelligence. So, very handy document. Be sure to look at it if you get lost. Okay, let's get this installed on Linux. First, open a terminal, and then install Git core with apt-get. This is going to give you the Git version control system that we use to maintain the GAMS software. Then we're going to export GAMS root to where we want to install GAMS. This is usually in your home directory /GAMS or in home/project /GAMS. The last variable we need to set is cores. This is the number of CPU cores you have in your system. This essentially reflects the number of threads that we need to launch during the build system to make this run faster on your system. The second to last step here is cloning the repository into your local GAMS root directory. And after that, running a script that you just downloaded in the scripts Linux directory to install all the prerequisites and also to compile the tests. It is highly recommended that after you follow this process, you copy over the variables that are reported by the installation process and copy them into your bashrc file. This is a file that's loaded every time you load a terminal or any kind of program in Linux and gives you the variables so you can use GAMS and MADARA at your terminal line.
To install GAMS, we first need to do 5 things. We're going to install Git, then we're going to specify 2 environment variables, we're going to clone the repository, and we're going to build them. So to get started, let's go ahead and copy and paste from the slide notes into the terminal. So I've already used sudo before in this session, so it didn't ask me for a password, but it's probably going to ask you for a password to install new software on your machine. Here, everything's gone fine, and it's installed the latest version of Git onto my new Ubuntu installation. Next, we need to create 2 environment variables, GAMS root and cores. GAMS root here in the default slide notes is set to home, your home directory, /project /GAMS. If we look inside of my home directory, which I'm currently in, you'll see that we don't have a projects directory. So in order to use the exact slide notes we have here, I'm going to go ahead and make there a projects folder. This is going to put the projects folder directly in my home directory. So now that we've done that, I should be able to export this variable and have GAMS root set appropriately. So I'm just going to copy and paste into this window. Next, we're going to set my cores equal to 4. This is just saying that I have 4 CPU cores available for compilation of my project. And again, this is just a convenience thing for our script. By default, it has only 1 core available, which means you're only going to launch 1 thread to build, which is slower than 4 cores. Now, as you can see, the next part of this is to clone the repository for GAMS into our GAMS root variable directory here. So that's going to be inside of home project GAMS for how I've set things up here. This will just take a couple of minutes to download, depending on your network connection and your speed available. Now that GAMS has been downloaded into the GAMS root directory, we should be able to run this build script that we have here by simply copy and pasting into the same terminal window. Installation of GAMS and MADARA and all prerequisites may take several minutes, depending on what you already have installed. If you set up your vrep root, if you set up your ace root and things of nature and already have that download installing, then you can take minutes just to install this. And it may take 10 to 20 minutes to install on most machines.
after the initial installation of GAMS and MADARA on your system, you may need to update at a later date. The way you update the GAMS and MADARA softwares is very similar to how you install them in the first place. So the first thing we do is open a terminal, and then we run that same build script. So instead of doing all of the setting of variables, all of the git clones and things of nature, all you need to do is call that build C++ script with test or whatever you want to do, and this will enable the features you want and just do simple git pulls in a very fast installation process. So we've already gone over the build C++ script, which is a standard way to install GAMS and MADARA on your system. However, build C++ is actually a convenient script that wraps around another script called basebuild.sh. This includes all of the non-default modules that you can enable on your system, things like security with SSL and features like that. Build C++ simply passes in options that make sense for the options we want. Most options are completely optional. For instance, if you'd like to build the MADARA, GAMS, all the tests, and vrep, you can pass these arguments into the base build script.
After your installation, in your slide notes, you'll see a section that talks about copying the printouts of export equals to your home bashrc file. This is important because it'll set up your MADARA and GAMS environments inside of your own bash shell, so anytime you launch a terminal, you'll be able to access GAMS and MADARA immediately. If you don't do this, you'll have to reset these environment variables every time you launch a terminal and every time you launch a new session or application that requires it. So, in this section, what it's really talking about is at the end of your installation, you're going to see these export, variable name equals value, all throughout here. These are where we've actually installed ACE, MADARA, GAMS, and vrep into. At any point in time, you can change these variables to point to different locations. For instance, we actually didn't change directory into the projects directory, so if you look inside of my home directory, I've actually installed ACE, MADARA, and other things like vrep into the home directory instead of inside of the projects directory where GAMS is. And again, you can look inside of projects to see GAMS. If we want to move those directories into the projects directory, that's perfectly fine. But if you want to keep them where they are right now, which is in the home directory, we essentially keep the variables that it recommends here. We're going to go ahead and do this right now and just copy these variables from the very end of our installation printouts into the bashrc file. So what I've done is I've selected everything here, and I'm going to do copy. And then I'm going to bring up VI, which is a type of editor. You can use gedit or any of those other kind of text editors, whatever you feel comfortable with. But I'm going to open up my .bashrc file in my home directory. And I'm going to press Shift-G to go to the very end of here. You see I've already set up these variables, but I'm going to go ahead and delete these. And I'm going to insert, by pressing I in VI, the things I've copied from here. After this, I'm going to right quit by just pressing Shift: right quit. And at that point, my bashrc should be saved. If I want to load those variables into my current terminal, I'll need to do source or a period. So you can say source and then your home directory, bashrc, to reload those variables in here. And to check to see that you've done everything correctly, you can type env, which will print out all the environment variables you have, and you just look for things like GAMS root, MADARA root, and ACE root to see if these are installed in the correct locations and your environment variables are updated. To test out our installation, we're going to run one of the test programs inside of MADARA. If you go to your slide notes, we're copying the thing on 2.9 here to run test reasoning throughput. So we're going to copy this, and we're going to paste that into our terminal window. Now this is going to run a series of hundreds of thousands of tests, and at the end of it, it's going to tell us what the performance is like on our system. So we're really testing out the throughput of MADARA and GAMS. As you can see at the end of this operation, it's going to show us several different printouts at the end. First of all, if we scroll up a bit, we're going to see the printouts that show the number of nanoseconds it took for the tests. Then we're going to see the average nanoseconds it took for each operation. And then at the very end of it, we're going to see the hertz rates you could expect from doing these types of operations in your programs. These includes things like using containers, which is really the recommended way of programming with MADARA. For assigning a container, we can run at tens of megahertz. For increments, we can run at 6 megahertz or so using the container classes. You can use these to answer questions from your managers or from people that are interested in your project of understanding exactly how fast you can make things update in MADARA and GAMS.
Now that we've installed GAMS and MADARA in our systems, we get to do the actual programming of autonomy and distributed artificial intelligence in our systems. In the next 2 modules, we're going to use the GAMS project configuration tool to create our own distributed artificial intelligence projects, and then we're going to create our own distributed algorithm.